And welcome back to Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 66, and I am your host, Jared Morris. So, there aren't many regular activities that I do that produce the maelstrom of emotions that giving a presentation does. And I'm thinking about this morning because next week I am giving a presentation at the Ascend conference in Philadelphia. And I haven't given a presentation in a while. It's actually been several months since I've given a presentation. And I was just thinking about this morning, just kind of the emotional somersaults that I will go through when it's time to give a presentation, and how important it is throughout that entire process leading up to the presentation, how important it is to really think about primility and really try to make sure that my pride and my humility are in balance, because that tends to be the issue. Is I tend to swing from one extreme to the other, especially in the weeks out from the presentation, when there's still a month, maybe 2 months left. There's probably too much pride. I'm probably too confident, too comfortable, thinking, okay, everything's going to be okay. I'm speaking about a topic that I've spoken about before, not a big deal. Hello, my love. It's always fun doing these in front of a live studio audience. So, where was I? I'm distracted when she walks into the room. What can I say, even after all these years? So, yes, so probably a little bit overconfident, which tends to lead to a little bit of procrastination when it comes to actually putting the presentation together. But what's interesting is, as soon as I get to that part of it, the overconfidence goes away, and I start swinging the other way. And it's one of those where, as the presentation approaches and I start to think about everything that I'm going to say and how it may be judged, and how it may not be relevant to this person, how maybe this is an old example and maybe they've heard what I'm going to say on the podcast and they don't want to hear it again. Every little thing will just kind of pop into my head at a different time. And it really swings me to that other end of the spectrum. And I have to remind myself, look, I was asked to do this presentation for a reason. I've clearly demonstrated some level of expertise in this area and some interesting, compelling way of explaining this for them to ask me to present. I've got a worthwhile message to give, and it's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect for every single person in the room. I've just got to reach one person, or I've just got to reach a few people, make it worthwhile for those folks so that people really take something away. Everything's going to be okay. These are the kinds of things that I'm telling myself. And it's really kind of a swing back and forth. And as the presentation day approaches and I've got my presentation done, I'll then start practicing a bunch. And it's funny because I'll kind of procrastinate that practice a little bit. And I'll say about a week before, okay, let me start practicing a couple times a day. That'll never happen. But usually about 2 days before, maybe 3 days before, I'll really start practicing leading up to the presentation. And, because at that point, the pressure of the presentation is there. And, that fear of really screwing up is there. And all of these thoughts about everything that could go wrong, those are, just flooding in more and more. And that will drive me to practice. And I actually used to kind of think that was a bad thing. Like, maybe I'm not that good of a presenter. Maybe I'm not that confident. Maybe I just don't have any self-assurance, because I feel like I have to practice and practice over and over again. If you've ever stayed in a hotel room next to mine, during a presentation, you've probably heard me talking to my walls over and over again. And I used to think, I guess, I don't know why, I guess I thought a lot of really seasoned presenters, and maybe there are some who do this, but they don't really need to practice. They've got their material. They can get up there. They can just say it, no nervousness, no nothing. And an experience that changed that was actually at the Authority Rainmaker conference last year when Henry Rollins spoke. And I don't think I've ever seen a speaker. No, not I don't think. I have never seen a speaker get up in front of a room full of people and be more self-assured than Henry Rollins, talking without notes, without slides, telling these incredibly immaculate and detailed and emotional and compelling stories. And it really comes across like he's just getting up there and just pulling these stories out of his memory and just telling you. And as I'm watching him, it almost killed my confidence a little bit, thinking, man, this guy's incredible. And look at how natural this is. And he's just telling us stories. And I got a chance to ask him a question after that presentation. He stayed and I mean, he hung around for hours signing autographs, taking pictures. It was really impressive. And I was asking him about his preparation and how he gets up there and gives such a confident presentation. And he basically said it was just practice and preparation and saying the stories over and over to himself, figuring out which ones he wants to tell. That's his preparation. Again, no slides, but then just in the hotel room over and over again, telling the stories over and over again. When he's at home in California, I think he said, he'll walk around on Venice Beach just talking to himself over and over. People probably think he's crazy, this old guy talking to himself, just telling the stories. And even for this guy who has been on stage so much and who has done so much and who is so good at what he's doing when it comes to a presentation, even he is putting that much time into practicing for every presentation. And that reminded me that, feeling a little bit nervous or feeling like you have to really put that time into the presentation, that's not a sign of lack of confidence. That's not some kind of negative. Really, that's being in the sweet spot with your pride and your humility. It's believing that you have something worthwhile to say, believing that you have it in you to give a really good presentation, and then putting in the time to give that presentation. And also remembering that as important as your message is and what you want to say, it's also important to be audience focused and to really take the time to make sure that the stories, that the examples match the audience, and that you have practiced in a way that will, because you've only got one chance when you're up there on stage. And the worst thing, and I've had this happen to me so often, is getting off stage and thinking, dang it, I didn't explain that the way I wanted to. There's such a better way to say that with more impact. And the more that you practice, the better you get at actually using that impactful phrase or wording or story or whatever it is in the presentation. So really, focusing on balancing that pride, that humility, to me has really been a key to giving presentations. And now over the next week, I'll need to walk the walk that I'm talking right now and actually do that. But I feel good about being able to do that. It's a process that I've gone through now for the last few presentations. And so I think for you, when you have a presentation to give, even if it's not in front of a room of 1,000 people, if it's, a small presentation just to a few people, or a Skype presentation or whatever it is, I think really taking a step back and, figuring out where you may be on that pride, humility spectrum, and then using that to help guide your next step. If you're feeling a lack of confidence, if you're really nervous, take a few minutes and remember why you're in this position to give the presentation in the first place. Clearly, people think that you have something important to say, and now is your opportunity to say that. But if you, kind of realize that you're getting a little bit nervous because you haven't practiced, maybe you've been a little bit too overconfident and now you're swinging in that other direction, take a step back, do some practicing. Really make sure that you've got it locked down, that you know your stories that you're going to tell, that you've really got your presentation down cold. And whichever place you find yourself a little bit out of balance, use that to make that next decision, to take that next action, and that will help you to be prepared to give the best presentation that you can give. Well, thank you very much for listening and for watching to this episode of Primility Primer. I always appreciate it. Go to primility.com/join and make sure you get on our email list. Not only will you get our Monday morning email, which is a simple thought to get your week started out on the right foot, you will also get our Friday email digest, so that if you have to miss an episode, I know it's hard to stay up to date with a 5-day-a-week show. If you have to miss an episode or two, that Friday digest will give you the titles, it'll give you the descriptions, and you can get caught up and choose which episodes you want to listen to. All right, everybody, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Primility Primer. It's Wednesday, so it'll be an episode of Wisdom Wednesday. Join us live at 6:30, or we'll be here with the podcast as we always are. In the meantime, stay cognizant of your pride and your humility, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Wrist bump.